Okay, I'm ready.
Hey guys, welcome back to Style Over Substance with me, Scarlett.
Me, Mim. Hiya.
How are you doing, Mim?
I've got the Sunday blues. It's all our
Yeah.
listeners. We record on the weekend, and I feel like from the moment I woke up this morning, I was like, the day's going by so quickly.
Yeah.
Oh my God, my life is flashing before
The
my
fear.
eyes. The fear set in. And so I have been relatively productive today, which is good. But I really feel I keep just looking at the time and I've got, oh God, I don't really want Monday to happen. I think, you know
Mm.
what? If 2021 is not the year that we start working 4 days a week and have 3 days off, I don't know when it's going to happen.
I
This
saw an article
revolution
about
needs to
this
happen.
that a few companies are adopting that. I
Mm.
think it was like that 3 million of the UK are set to have a 4-day working week or something
Oh,
like that. And I was thinking, please, can
yeah.
that be me? I I actually find it, I know we don't like to talk about pandemo stuff on here,
Mm,
but I actually find it flabbergasting
mm,
that a 4-day week hasn't been initiated
yeah.
for our sanity.
Yeah.
You know, it's been an unprecedented time. We love
Yeah.
that word, but like it has been, it's not been easy on mental health. It's not been easy to stay inside. And we haven't even had a half day on a Friday as an
Yeah.
issue.
Oh my God.
I
Dress down
think that's actually,
Fridays, summer
yeah.
Fridays.
I just think that that should have been sort of, even if it's just for a lockdown,
Hmm.
like, I don't even know. Even if we had to work those hours in the 4 days, I just think, come
Hmm.
on, give
Yeah.
us something. I hope
I,
there's a bank holiday when this is over. I'm saying it. Like,
yeah. Mental health bank holiday or something to that effect. But
yeah.
I do think that having that 3 day, 4 day split, that extra day off would like help the economy
Yeah.
because people
No, I
love to go
agree.
out
And
and eat and
also,
stuff.
people, like, I think studies show that people would get the same amount of work done in four
Yeah.
days. Like,
Yeah.
it's not even a
No.
productivity issue. Oh, we can
Yeah.
dream. We can dream.
Anyway. Yeah, but other than that, I'm surviving. What about you?
I'm good. I have just come back from my first, well, actually, it's not my first barbecue of the year,
Mm.
but because I had a car park barbecue. For listeners who don't know, I live in a flat. I don't have a garden. So the way that my flatmate and I have a barbecue is we sit in the parking spaces by our flats and have a barbecue.
I didn't even know
Um,
that.
it's actually really pleasant. It's not as like
Yeah. Yeah.
as trashy as it sounds,
Yeah.
but I had a barbecue in my parents' garden and got to see my two nephews. So I'm sort of on a little high of just
Mm,
like, you forget how much you absorb energy from other people. So, yeah,
100%. I mean,
enjoying that. Yeah.
the other weekend when I was actually out, as we call it
Yes.
over here,
Mim had some nice out
I
time.
was, and it was literally just to like walk out into like a beer
Mm,
garden and just see other people enjoy
yeah.
themselves was
It's
amazing.
it's the buzz of
It
other
was a buzz.
people. Yeah. Yeah.
Living their best lives. I loved it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's important. But I've also been enjoying. We've had some sunshine.
mm.
You can't quite see it,
I
but
can see freckles.
yeah, freckles are
Yeah.
forming. And I actually, so listeners, I'm very freckly, and I feel my truest self when I've got loads of freckles. So I'm
Mm,
excited.
nice.
Yeah, but we digress. What
Yeah.
is your fashion story this week, Mim?
So my fashion story is a bit of a downer, to be honest, and completely Kel surprise. Um, but it came completely out of the blue. Albert Elbaz has died. He passed away.
Mm,
And I think I'm not entirely sure if it was complications, but it was from the big C. And
gosh.
yeah, so he's passed away shortly after launching his AZ factory line, which was all about like this super curated wardrobe. And that was due to be a big project of his, especially after I think maybe about 10 years or so away from being in the spotlight of fashion. So I think that has really, he wasn't that old. He was only 59. And it's sad in the sense that, you know, when someone's on the cusp of doing something new and an exciting time in their life, and then for that to get cut short, it's just sad kind of for anyone. So yeah, another like fashion giant has gone.
Yeah, it's really sad, isn't it? And we get fewer and fewer left in it. So the blow is going to be really, really big when that's eradicated. All the big names have sort of left the building. Yeah. And so I don't believe they've sort of announced much more than that, have they, Lama?
No.
So watch this space to see what might happen, if there's going to be something going on.
Yeah. Well, what is your fashion story?
So my fashion story is, hopefully by the time we've put this out, tonight is the Oscars as we're recording.
Oh.
Some form of an Oscars. I don't even understand how it's working. I don't know.
Well, they had another like award ceremony.
There was a Grammys that happened somewhat, and you know, there was another Golden Globes or something that happened.
And everyone's at home.
But we're also slightly getting into a better position. Vaccines are happening in the UK and US. So I'm just really hoping to have that aspirational fashion, that catwalk, red carpet look. So hopefully we'll post our best looks, our favorite looks.
Oh yeah.
From tonight. But yeah, I'm really hoping that people go for it. Like my first night out would be like, I think we should expect everyone to feel like Lady Gaga, you know?
Yeah, but then it's like people are going to be largely at home, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know if people will be like zooming in.
Yeah. And I don't quote me, but I did see something going around how the organizers of the Oscars had put out like a memo like, yeah, casual's fine, but we really don't want you to do casual. We want you to dress up.
Amazing.
I don't know how that's going to fare.
Well, because half of like the coverage, so the Oscars obviously airs US time, and I used to try and stay awake, but all the big awards are like quite far into the night. But like the bit that is still sort of that we would be awake for in the UK is the red carpet. And you get the images coming through like at night, and you just start seeing these looks, and that's huge. That's such a big attraction for the Oscars, is to see what people are wearing. So yeah, I mean, if you want to wear a t-shirt and jeans, I guess if that's within the dress code, go for it. But yeah, especially if you're sat on your own sofa. But
I know, especially if you don't win anything, you know.
Yeah, and also who knows? You could have a sparkly top on, but some joggers on the bottom, and we don't know. But yeah, I'm excited. I feel excited to see some great looks. There's been a few award seasons where there have been some exciting things, but I think it feels like another slice of normality. I want that aspirational fashion.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we'll see some cool looks.
Yeah. Cool. I like it.
We interrupt this broadcast to remind you, go follow us on Instagram, Style Over Substance Pod. Shoot us an email, styleoversubstancepeak@gmail.com. Find us on YouTube, find us on Twitter. We've got all the links on our Instagram. You know what to do. Yeah.
So do you want to introduce our week's topic?
Sure. So this week we are discussing a requested topic, but also something we've been desperate ourselves to cover. And that is the topic of internships. So specifically today, we're going to talk about, are internships a good idea? What we think of internships, how you get an internship, and are they still relevant? Because it's an unusual thing. Not every industry has internships, And so, yeah, we're just going to sort of tell you some statistics, as usual, our thoughts and opinions, and go from there. So, Mim, off the bat, so guys, also for context, internships tend to happen more for design. It's not always the case. There are PR internships and stuff like that. And
like more creative parts of fashion.
Yeah, but it does tend to sort of monopolize on that side of things. As somebody who hasn't done internships, what is your initial opinion on an internship?
Okay, so high level thoughts is that I have obviously heard a lot of horror stories regarding internships. I appreciate that they can be a really good way of getting exposure into an internship, gaining experience, gaining new contacts. And yeah, internships to me aren't inherently bad. What I do think is that it's really hard to get one, really hard to obtain one. I could be wrong, but that's just my thoughts about internships. And I think that based on controversy in the past where a lot of people haven't been paid, or a large proportion who go for internships aren't paid, not only is that what I see as really unfair because you've got still so many expenses, but it really means that there are whole swathes of the population who just physically cannot afford to gain that insight and that intern experience. So internships, yeah, they sound great on paper, but I still think there's probably a lot of work to be done to improve them. Yeah. What about you?
Cool. So, yeah, I guess I definitely benefited a lot from doing internships. What I will say is that now, so I don't know how many years ago I interned. It's not quite 10, but it's nearly there. It's about 8 years ago, maybe. It was essentially free, like unpaid. I would maybe get contributions towards my travel. Some places did a contribution towards your lunch. But other than that, that was pretty standard. It was very uncommon to have a paid internship. And there were no regulations around unpaid internships. Whereas now there are regulations, and the only way you can have an unpaid internship where they're doing like feasible work. So that might still be a blurry line. I have a feeling it is like, if someone's sharpening pencils or whatever, that's one thing. But if they're physically doing like a job, that would be someone else's job in the company type of a thing. They have to be within their studies. They can't be having an internship. So a lot of the time you have a year in industry, or it could be during your summer holidays when you're at uni, but you're not, once you've graduated, it's somewhat iteral to not pay people, basically. Okay. Which I think is a great step in the right direction. But I also think that there's graduate schemes and things like banking and all of that stuff. You have a graduate scheme, and why the fashion industry can't maybe adopt that stance instead, I actually think might be better. But yeah, it's a really tricky one because you benefit a lot from it, but it also sits totally not well with me that you can justify not paying people. But yeah,
I think that's a good place to start would be the idea of maybe what the benefits of an internship, why you would want to do one, and then we could go into like the negatives and like the massive issue of being paid. What would you say is like the biggest positive to internships?
So first of all, if you're sort of before even maybe uni, it's a great way to see even if fashion is for you, because the perceived idea of fashion, and this is kind of, guys, the reason we wanted to do this podcast, is there's a perceived idea and then there's a reality, just like with everything. But the perceived idea of working in fashion is so glamorous.
It's so glamorous.
I know The Devil Wears Prada's tried to like debunk it, but also then Anne Hathaway's character becomes fabulous during her time there. And yeah, there's like this glamorous sort of attribution with fashion and all of that stuff. So I think that's a great way to understand if it's for you, and get some work experience. And unfortunately, fashion is an industry where experience matters. So to get your first paid job, they want you to have had experience, which is somewhat impossible if there aren't free opportunities out there. And yeah, I think it also helps you, like, brands very differ. Like, they differ quite a lot in luxury, with their ethos, maybe the way they treat you. There's different levels of intensity. So maybe it helps you like not be too committed in that sense or instance, and then you learn maybe from other people you meet, like where's best, and you form a network. And then on the flip side, internships are needed by fashion industry because they can't afford workers.
Yeah, so bear in mind, like a lot of my kind of statistics is from this website called Intern Mag. I think they're also a magazine, but you can find them like on Twitter and stuff. And they have this report that's based on like loads of reviews that they've had from like listeners and readers about their internships in the creative industries in general. So obviously fashion does fall within this. And they themselves say that it's seemingly still a common stepping stone, internships into creative industries. So it is still kind of relevant and good to have one under your belt. They say employers expect to see them, which can be such a catch-22 when it's difficult to get one. But then if you want to get a job, you have to get an internship and all of this. And it can be a great way to gain insight. And as you said, great, like to network and stuff. But from that, I see like the issue is like, again, with perception and reality, you think, oh, internships, they're fundamentally meant to be educational. Yeah. But what if you get an internship and they're actually not worth it, that you're literally just doing like pickup runs, buying coffee, photocopying stuff. And yeah, there's one thing to say that if you're in the office and you're around the buzz and you're in the hub of it, you're by like osmosis, you're going to learn things. But at the same time, if you're not being taught things explicitly and you feel like you go in for an internship and you're not actually, like from an information perspective, you're not any better off, then it's a bit of a waste of time. But it's one of those things like, I just need to have something on my CV. Do you think that happens?
Yeah, and you're so right about I'm a big believer of, especially if you're doing something for free, that should come with like almost mentorship. That they have a due diligence to teach you things because you aren't being paid. So I do believe that there is a due diligence to help people and to like teach them things and help them learn new skills, because like you said, they're not a PA, so they don't need to be learning how to do coffee, like errands, whatever, like, you know. And that is very typical. I've got 1,000 errands like that I've run in my time, that like at one point I felt like a human courier service. And you're not then learning, and that's not really the point. Like, you could have any lackey do that. And actually, I want to learn how to design things and how they sit and do that process, but I'm spending like two-thirds of my day outside the office. How can you pick that up?
Yeah.
So I do think there's a real due diligence for that. But the problem is the fashion industry has the reputation of that there's so many people who want to be in it and so few jobs, that you are led to believe that you just got to take whatever you can get, and you're just desperate to get, because even for some internships, they want you to have work experience before an internship.
What?
Which, and like, it's an internship, you know? And I will say that, so one job that I had, the internship was a real mixture. I helped out, but it was very lackey to start with, like very errand running, very much going and getting coffees and getting people lunch and stuff like that. Whereas other places that I've worked, it's been very much a job. Like, you are helping from the get-go. And of course, you might be the person they call on to go and get the coffee, but you're also sat at a desk day in, day out doing stuff.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is, but then also if you're doing a job, then you should be paid. It's such sort of a minefield of morality. And what we touched on earlier, which is a really important issue that we should get onto, is very classist. I was lucky that, like, my parents, well, we live like on the outskirts of London, so I could get a train in. Like, if they covered my train fare, some places didn't, and my parents gladly helped me with that. And I also actually had my student loan during the year I was interning because I was on a year in industry. But some of my friends lived Manchester way, had to move to London, so they're paying rent. They then have to get a weekend job. If you're interning, you're not working 9 till 5. First of all, the fashion industry does 9 till 6 as it is. So you're lucky if you leave at 6 o'clock. You have a full week of work. Then you've got to work at like Topshop or wherever to work all weekend to afford your rent. And like, that's not right. That it's, you know, it's based, it benefits people who have money.
I think what like a core issue of internships nowadays is this like balance between like benefit and, is it a benefit to you or it's not? I think many maybe older people who've never had an internship kind of perceive internships as like old school apprenticeships.
For sure.
But apprenticeships are much different. They're far more structured. You can come out with like a certification sometimes. You are, nowadays with internships, you do get paid. Legally, you must get paid, and there's a rate. There's like a standard rate you'll get paid. It's not a lot, but you do get paid. And it is definitely more structured, and you're kind of registered with that employee. Like, the scheme is run in tandem with your employer and you and stuff like that. And so, of yesteryear, when the UK used to have a lot more apprenticeships, it was far more common to do it, and it was really beneficial for people to go into all kinds of industries. And I think there's a tendency to think that's like, oh, what are you complaining about? If they're training you, then why do you need to get paid? And it's like, well, if they're not training you because they know they can get away with it and they just need an extra pair of hands on deck, then they will get away with it. I mean, reading some other bits on Intern Mag, it said that one intern had said, before joining this team of 25, she actually didn't know that 20 of them out of the 25 were interns. And going back to the idea you mentioned, is like, a lot of places, well, fashion is notorious for underpaying people compared to other industries for a very similar role. And it's that idea of, you know, anyone would love to take this job, so we don't need to pay you, even though you are spending 40 hours, even 50 hours in a lot of cases, working full-time roles with us, and you're doing a job we actually need. It's not like we're just doing you a favor. We are still not really going to pay you. So there is this perception of like, oh, what are you complaining about? You're getting training, you're getting this, you're getting that, you don't need pay. But it is important because you're getting taken advantage of in some cases. And as you said, we'll touch on being paid and like classism a bit more. But yeah, it does seem that it's a very easy way of hiring people without this employee-employer commitment legally.
For sure. And also, the apprenticeship thing you touched on is so valid. But that was also a generation of not everyone went to university. So you did an apprenticeship to learn a trade without further education. But all these people who are doing internships have a degree or are earning one. And that's a really respected thing in most other fields, you know? Like, and I know some places it might not be about intellectual sort of whatever, but that doesn't matter. That someone's taking further education, they are having student loans or whatever, they are investing in their future. So then for you to kind of not value that is actually somewhat irresponsible and just like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and so yeah, I think there's a lot of training, but yeah, it's definitely terrible. And so like, I just know the amount of people who used to just even comment on the fact that they couldn't afford to intern because, or a new intern would start and go to me, how can you afford to do this? And I was like, well, my parents live nearby, so I can just get the training. I'm not having to pay for rent too. Like, but also you do then just have to rely on other sources of income other than your 9 till 6 job, which is too much. You know, here we are talking about wanting a 4-day week.
Yeah, and the topic of like diversity in fashion has been such big. A topic of conversation in recent years, whether that's makeup, whether that's modeling, or whether it is behind the scenes in design, in like merchandising, buying, whatever it might be in the company itself. And it's avenues such as internships that get people into these industries. If they don't support diversity from the beginning, then how can you end up with a company or an industry that says they want to reflect society at large, or at the very least not be discriminatory against particular groups? So for example, statistics that I have is that half of people who took on internships were paid between 100 and 500 euros a month, but had expenses, half of them had expenses of between 600 and 900 euros. So when you see that even if you were
paying to work.
Yeah, exactly. You're paying to work, as you said. Like, what they're paying you does not cover the minimum,
and that's
expenses.
not a lot of expenses.
It's not. Exactly 900 euros a month is not a lot of money in expenses. So it's then, okay, we're talking about upper middle class or like upper class kids whose parents can pay for them, if anything, can maybe pay for a flat in the city for them, if anything. They don't have to take on an extra job. It means that even things like lunch, you know, like £5 a day to some people might not be like a lot of money, but it is. £5 a day for lunch every day is a lot of money for some people. Like,
but also like
when I was that
some
age,
places you can't even get lunch for £5, you know?
Exactly. And like
you said, £5 adds up.
Yeah,
you know.
And like and we already know, like, student loan in this, we were so lucky that we were the last like cohort to have to pay the lesser fees, like the band one, I think it's called.
And we're repayment plan 1.
Yeah, that's it. That's what we put on our tax. And yeah, so even at the tuition cost that we were paying, I mean, we paid it after the fact, but like our maintenance loans and things like that, it wasn't enough to survive off when we were at uni. So then to think like, and I remember I didn't do an internship, but because I studied languages, I did an Erasmus, and I remember the money I used to get from Erasmus and my student loan, it wasn't enough for me to live abroad. And I was living in one of like the cheapest countries in Western Europe. And it's like bizarre to think, okay, I'm going to do this full-time job, 50 hours a week. I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to navigate a new like industry, a new field, a new way of working. I'm no longer in education, have all these expenses, worry about like, you know, as one of our past guests had said, like, I don't really know what time to leave.
Yeah.
Like long days and things, and just not get that either like recognition for their training that they've already done thus far, or just like, thanks for being here. Here's a bit of money in your pocket so that you can come for another, like, how many other months?
I know, it's terrible. So my first internship, The way they did it was they just paid for my train fare.
Mm-hmm.
And like, my parents live in zone 6. That's not a cheap train. Like,
yes,
that's like £70 a week that they were having to pay me. So that's more than the £5 a day sort of, which would normally be like what you expect from an internship.
Okay.
But my second internship, they only paid me £5 a day. So that's a huge, like, that shortcoming of 25 quid. I was paying that a week essentially to work there. And yeah, that's mental that that's just allowed. And I remember being like, but that's my train. Like, that doesn't cover my train fare to get here.
How can I get here?
How are you justifying this? You're actually not even paying me like anything. So yeah, and I just think that something that basically means, say there's a family, and like, no person should have to spend 40 hours a week and not have a salary at the end of it. You know, like, and there are some families that can't afford to do that, but no family should have to afford to do that. So, but there are people where like children in their family are expected to help contribute to the home.
Yeah, exactly.
So how can those people afford the opportunities that I was able to do because that wasn't my situation? Mm-hmm. That's not fair, because that person could be way more talented than I am. If not, like, if that's not important, the same talent, the same whatever, but just because of their circumstance, that's not afforded to them. Yeah. And that's a real problem, because that means we're missing out on talent, for one. It means that diversity of having people from different backgrounds, like, that's important in a workplace. It's important to have a mixture of men and women. It's important to have a diversity of cultures, a diversity of races, a diversity of everything, because you'll get the best out of everything with the most opinions and minds like put to everything. Mm-hmm. So it's a real shame that then people aren't represented then in the fashion industry, or it's only a certain classism. And the unfortunate thing as well is that most designers have financial backing or are from wealthy backgrounds. So it's this kind of snowball of sort of classism, which is a real shame. And there shouldn't be an industry that promotes that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, as you said, like, bringing up the fact that those who own these companies or are able to start fashion brands, or who are the CEOs of they come from a level of privilege themselves. Not saying that's inherently a bad
thing, it's not always the case either, but a lot of the time it is the case.
These internships can perpetuate those, and by all means, is this not a reflection of the whole industry? Like, some people have internships and they're really good and they're amazing and they're worthwhile, and the people that they work with are lovely. But I still think it's if we're going to say that internships are not going to be paid and they don't need to be, there should be you need to provide this level of training. Just like we do with universities. We pay to go to university because we know we're getting something of value out of it. There is no reason for us to throw money at something and not get any value in return.
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to ask you a question. Mm-hmm. So 2021, a big year, a pivotal year.
Big year.
But aside from what's been going on, like, over the past few years, we've been increasingly living in a world where you can kind of carve out your own career to some degree. Like them or not, influencers have completely changed the way that we see work, we see valid work, who can get paid for doing stuff they love. The idea of, like, we no longer have gatekeepers as such in the world as prestigious as like luxury fashion. So we have people online who are stylists, designers, artists, whatever, you name it. You can make money online just doing your own thing if you're good at self-promotion. What do you think is like the relevance of internships in 2021 and beyond?
I'd like to think that they'll be clamped down even more, and that it is maybe only to kind of go alongside education. I still think there should be, it might not be a full wage because fashion companies aren't super wealthy, or they don't choose to spread their money correctly, because the problem is, like, you know, immediate jobs. And what I will say is, I also think the unfortunate thing is, so wages in fashion are notoriously low until you make it. And when we say make it, until you're the head of a department, that's when that's when the six figures come in. Before then, that's not going to happen. And a six-figure salary, fantastic. Like, you know, that's
a lot of money.
That's booming. But the starting salary is essentially minimum wage. And I think that's justified by the fact that you have free labor. So you're then so grateful to be paid, and essentially, like, and you shouldn't be, because actually any other counterpart, any entry level graduate job, so like, I don't know what minimum wage is now, it's about probably 17, 18 grand. I think a regular graduate job is probably around 22 to 25. So that's already quite a big gap. That's a really big gap, especially for like your first job. Like, because in fashion, to get from like 18 to 22 or 25, you've either got to have left two jobs to get those promotions to get there. You're not going to get that easily. That's a big way to climb up from starting at 18. And yeah, I just think it almost allows for the salaries to start as low as they do. And it's like that thing of, I was reading an article before this about a woman who was talking about her experience and in internships, and how like she was working all these hours for a brand in fashion and surrounded by beautiful things, but she couldn't even afford to buy herself a new coat, you know, because she's not being paid enough. So my hope is that internships, if it's not going to be minimum wage, it's got to be like at least like £200 a week. Like, it's got to be something that can cover someone's rent, cover someone's, like, you know, it's got to be something where it's manageable, and it's making it more available for other people, and also prepares companies that, like, I'm paying this person, so if they're not good, I'll get rid of them. But also, like, I'm paying them, so I'm going to invest in them, and if they're good, then they can become an employee. Because it is a thing that paid internships have, like, they have sort of, what's the word? A conversion rate far higher. I think conversion rate for paid internships is like 60%. That they go on to employ those people, and unpaid is in the 30%.
That is such a good point that you've brought up. This idea of like investing in someone for the long term, and if you're going to pay them, and I also think that paying someone dignifies their role.
Sure.
I think that when I have read about people being unhappy in a role, it's either because, okay, they weren't given a clear job or clear job scope, the people they worked with nasty or whatever, or it was not structured, or they didn't learn anything. But the idea of being disrespected comes up a lot in testimonials.
For sure.
And the idea of people thinking you're expendable because you're just the intern, you know, you're just like, even when you, like, someone had written, they had a master's, but I guess they were just using this internship to maybe think that they could get a job after, a permanent job with this company afterwards, or it's just a way to get into the industry. But they were still being like disrespected as if they didn't know anything. And yeah, you're right. The idea of investing in someone and that conversion, I can completely see how it makes the person who's doing the internship want to stay. Because I think go on.
I think it stands you on the wrong foot from the get-go. You're right. It's the conversion of, like, I remember my brother giving me the advice when I was applying for a new job, and like they offered me a salary and it just wasn't quite what I wanted. Because I asked for what you want, you know, like that's what you want. And they'll either say yes or they'll say no. But if you don't ask and you go there with something you don't want, even when you get promoted, they'll just be promoting to you to where you thought you should have been before. So you're always on the back foot.
Yeah.
You're always playing catch up. You're never quite happy because you thought you deserved that when you started. And that's very much what sort of happens in fashion, because like, you obviously shouldn't have free labor, you know. And also the crazy thing is, okay, it's very, like, before people might come at me for saying this, it is very different, and I'm aware it's very different to have, you know, sweatshops and things like that. But if we're even starting in the head office, you're not paying staff. How is the attitude towards not paying your factory workers going to change?
When you were talking, I that's what I was thinking. I was like, this is a reflection of an ingrained culture that fashion, whether it's luxury, whether it's fast fashion industry has. It's the idea of, I can get something for cheap and I can make it into a diamond. And whether that's people who are no less than us because we work in and live in the Western world. But if we can like allow people who live and work in Asia and they get paid nothing, but they make the most beautiful things that we're obviously willing to pay for, then we can't be surprised that we have people here in our back garden, boohoo.com, who are, as you said, in HQ, very glamorous, head office, you know, sitting next to the head of blah, blah, and you're not getting paid either, even though you're there just as many hours as anyone else. Yeah, you don't have the responsibility, but that's not to say you're not contributing to the overall production.
Or they're not putting pressure on you to feel like you have to stay till 8 o'clock to get something finished, and that's a responsibility and a pressure in itself. Whether the head of the company is going to clamp down on you is different, but you still get made to feel pressure in other ways. I think that's a really good point. I've actually like really wound myself up about how much I've forgotten how much it really offends me, because I remember reaching a point where I don't even know if I was an intern anymore, but thinking just how outrageous it all is, and actually like that the pay in fashion is terrible, but the expectation of working hours longer than your contract. And I know every contract says within reason you may have to work more hours.
Yeah, but you've got to sign that, like, I'm willing to work over 47 hours a week or something it is.
But like, I'm telling you now, my last job, by the end I was working between 50 and 60 hours a week. And that's unacceptable. And obviously my salary didn't go up. Like, and it was I left because my salary didn't go up. Like, and that's crazy. That is crazy. And my intern would have been sat, if I had an intern, I didn't, that was half of the problem. But if I had an intern, she would have been sat there with me till that time. Maybe not me, because I'm someone who thinks an intern should go before the boss, because actually the boss is being paid. Like, but the intern is theoretically there too. And they're miserable just like I am, because they're working till that time. And if they're not, they will be eventually, because you can't enjoy that for forever. I just, it actually really, it makes me sad. It makes me really sad, because I love fashion. I love the industry, but they could really improve on that. But what I will say is France has much stricter regulations. So I was offered an internship in France. This is my dream, folks, for the record. Like Paris, Kenzo, on the knitwear team. At that time, I was really into knitwear, and I thought that was the path I wanted to go down. And the only way you can intern in France is it be with your education. So they were a bit more advanced than us. But it's not just, I'm at uni. Like, your university has to sign and fill out all these forms. Like, they take responsibility for you whilst you're there. And I'd graduated, and I begged my uni to sign these forms for me. I begged for them to let me go, and they wouldn't. And I get that, because I wasn't on their books anymore. I wasn't paying fees. They can't take responsibility for me. So alas, I never went to Kenzo, never went to Paris.
Oh, shit.
I know. Oh, how different my life may be.
I know.
But we can't wallow because I can't complain.
Mhm.
But I also really respect how rigorous the French way is. It's great because they also have a lot of fashion houses,
Mhm.
and they are very much like it has to be done by the book. But also
Mm.
visas and working visas in France are quite difficult as well. So I don't know if that's just a symbol of it's hard to work in France.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah.
If you were like 21-year-old Scarlett again, would you think that doing an internship is still worth it? Or do you
But
just think like, no, I'm not going to do it because it's just bullshit. Like I can maybe find training elsewhere, or pursue other avenues.
I think it's more a case of, I think the unfortunate thing is it's a rite of passage, and it's that inherent thing, a bit like how you mentioned earlier with apprenticeships. People have this archaic way of thinking, I did it, so you have to go through this. I very much had
Yes.
a manager where you could tell she got treated like crap as an intern, and she thought she had to be that way with me too. And I'm very much a believer of like, well, that's not how reform happens.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you suffered that, like our parents, if they parented us the way their parents parented them, that wouldn't be great parenting. You evolve.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
won't parent our kids the way our parents parented us. You
Mm-hmm.
move with the times, you evolve, we learn, and we progress. So it really used to agitate me. But I think there's still that sort of belief that
Yeah.
it's like you walk the boards in drama, like you pave the path with internships in fashion. And I think there is a great reason for them, as long as they're kept within your education. And but I think in hindsight, I would fight to ensure that as soon as I graduated, I was not an intern. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I did relatively early on that I like asked to be paid and stuff like that, because they were giving me lots of responsibility, and I was kind of like, I feel like I'm an employee. But in like hindsight, older Scarlett would be like, I've graduated. What job are you offering me?
Yeah. Yeah. I get what you mean. Like, this kids nowadays have never had it so good kind of attitude.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's about creating a better environment now than was previously, but in many ways we kind of moved backwards in a sense.
Yeah, but I also will say that in a sweeping statement,
Mm.
Gen Z is much more gutsy than like we were raised to be.
Mm. I think in part because there's so much more shared information now and so much more transparency about things.
I think
I
I
at the
think they've
time,
missed that British politeness we do for no reason, no good reason. If they see something wrong, they say it, and not in a rude way, but like not in a way we would have done. And I think that will
yeah,
help progress things.
I think when for me, but maybe it applies to you as well, when we were coming out of uni and stuff like that, and we were trying to navigate work and whatever, I don't think it even crossed my mind to go online. Like we didn't have that like resource in that sense. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
online was a thing. Of course, we're not that
We're
old.
not that
We're not that old.
old.
But to go online and like to go on Glassdoor. Was there a Glassdoor where I
Mm.
could read about internships? Don't think so. And like to go online and read about on Diet Prada, like how employees at X, Y, and Z were
Yeah.
being treated. We didn't have that. So it didn't cross my mind to see like, let me get reviews of where's the best place to work. It was like you took on and you internalized what is it like? Just general beliefs, I
Mm-hmm.
suppose. Now people have the wherewithal to like question things a little bit more.
They're equipped with the knowledge or the facilities to check if something is okay, you
Yeah.
know? And I think it took me a while to sort of ask people the question of, so do you mind that you kind of can't plan anything in your evenings?
Yeah.
And like, you know, you can't make plans and you have to keep saying, sorry, I'll be an hour late. No, I'm going to be another hour late. Like, does that bother you? And people be like, no, no, no. And then you get into the depths of it. And of course it does. Of course it does. And I think that, yes, you're right. The internet really helps with that. But also just, I think there is more of an approach of openness and communication on certain topics that I think we just used to just accept it. We just had to get on with it.
Yeah.
And we were grateful to have a job.
Definitely. I think in general, the nature of work, people are more willing to question work-life balance than we really ever have. And I mean, just thinking about the conversation we've had and how many internships aren't really bringing much benefit. And increasingly, we can see younger people maybe pursue different avenues to get into the fashion industry. Do you think the fashion industry will suffer because they don't have maybe as much willingness or like availability to free labor as they currently do with internships?
So one place that I worked for, the main way they survived was off of free labor. Like, as interns, we physically made like the clothes.
Okay.
And things like that. Not all of them, but we physically made them. And what I will say is, I think the fashion industry will suffer if they can't convert it. And of course, you know, progression sometimes that can't happen quickly because sometimes if people are happy, they're not going to move around in a job. But if there is potentially a space within the next 6 months, year, for you to have a design assistant, which is the entry level job of fashion, or a merchandising assistant, or your PR assistant, or wherever the field is of interning, I think you should, like, your question you should ask if you're applying for an internship is there progression for me to get hired here?
Okay.
Because, and they'll probably lie to you, but
every job does. They're like, oh yeah, we're looking to promote people within the next 18 months.
But if someone can't, it gives you something wishy-washy. And if someone's like, actually, yes, we will be looking for a design assistant in about 6 to 9 months, we absolutely will be needing one. And like, that's why we're hiring you, because that's how we foresee this. I think that's where it's fine. And I think that's where, like, that's great. But I think the place that I worked where they couldn't survive without interns, we used to have, around showtime, there maybe be 10 of us sat around a table, like squirreling away. And not a single one of those was hired by the company. It just, and people would just come in to do it. But like, only 4 people worked at that company the whole time. Like, within sort of, I helped them maybe over the space of a year and a half. It was still only ever 4 employees.
Wow.
So that's the problem of just having people in. You're desperate for experience, but like, they're never going to hire you.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah. So really, those places or those employers will suffer if they don't find a good way of retaining these like talents and giving them an incentive to want to stay and paying them for something. You know, because they will suffer. I mean, your business isn't viable if you can't pay your employees. It's not a viable business.
And I think fashion's has a real tendency to top heavy pay their staff, and that probably won't change, but really it should. That surely you should pay the people who actually do the stuff, you know. But yeah, I think it's a business model thing. But yeah, I think it's just I think some people have to face the harsh reality. If you can't exist without paying your staff, maybe you shouldn't exist, you know.
I think it's internships is also an extension of this like gig economy that we now live in. It's not inherently bad to have internships available. It's not inherently bad to work part of the gig economy. For some people, that flexibility, or for some people, that gritty experience of being an intern and that just way to get into the industry is all they're after. And they don't need anything else, or they're not after anything else. And that's great. But I think that idea of like, we don't need to give you any other workers' rights, time off, restricted working hours, pay, or just a structure of training, I think is like the most important, is where we've all kind of like normalized. Like, it's okay. Your employer doesn't have, they don't owe you anything. It's like, no, they do. They owe you something. They owe you, you know, training or pay or something like that. And I think it's a reflection of like what we've seen in other industries. But yeah, fashion is, and I don't know what it is, notoriously bad for payment. I don't get it.
Yeah, so when I was researching for this, what came up, and I actually think it'd be a really interesting topic for us to cover in a few weeks or down the line, is the culture of freelancing in fashion. And essentially, a lot of companies similar to interns basically exist on 0-hour contracts. Like,
Yep.
And that's, whether that's a good thing or not, freelance culture is great. Like, and I actually think the future of the world is not having like a steady 9 to 5. Like, I actually think that might disappear in the future. I think that we're such like diverse humans that I wouldn't be surprised, especially people who are more creatively minded. It might be different for lawyers or whatever, like certain professions it wouldn't work for. But I think that someone who's a designer could also help with graphic things, or like, you know, I think you could have 3 different hats that you wear in a week or wear in a month or whatever. I think that might be the future. Because I think we get bored easily. You know, our attention span is really short these days. Smartphones haven't helped. But so freelance culture is really important. It shouldn't have to disappear. It's not a bad word, but there's a real culture of you don't respect freelance staff as much as you do full-time staff. And those are the people you can play around with not paying as well. So I think that'd be a really interesting thing to touch on. But yeah, it's terrible that fashion has that reputation of not paying great. I've definitely not been paid a few times. Obviously I did in the end, but like not paid on the right day. And hey, like I don't have, like, if I'm being paid a terrible wage, I don't have a bucket full of coins to like back me up on the day that my rent comes out, like, you know, so that's damaging. If you got a mortgage that comes out, you know, that's coming out regardless.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that it's a shame that fashion isn't so steady. I really hope that that fashion does remain steady. And actually, this should have been my fashion story. I don't know if you read that, like, so Primark's earnings in their first week of being open were so high that they're going to repay all their furlough money. It's like 112 million or something like that.
Yeah.
And they're repaying it. And that is the power of the fashion industry.
Yeah.
In a week, Primark's earnings were so great that they can repay 112 million. They can commit to that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's the power of clothes. And I know that's fast fashion, but that also, like we talked about it last week, LV's sales went up. Like,
exactly.
The power of fashion, like there's got to be something where like it's so profitable. It's like the biggest economy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that it improves and like works out better. It's I love fashion. I hate it. I love it.
Yeah, on the flip side, like it made me think of my own experience as someone who never did an intern.
Yeah.
But like I worked the low level jobs.
Yeah.
I don't know if it put me at a disadvantage or it made no difference to my career and where I ended up having not done an internship. It's really difficult to know. And I guess we'll never know. I
think the most essential part of fashion, I think, is for design, whether that's rightly or wrongly. Because actually, I didn't get much design experience like in my first internships. But I think if it's more business wise, like PR, merch, all of that side of things, I genuinely believe that should be trained and you can be learned on the job. So can design, of course. I just did a degree in it, of course. But And the same with people who study like fashion business or merchandising and all of that stuff, or even if they study design and choose to go into that, things get trained. Like someone doesn't work in insurance and know how, they don't learn the day of a life of an insurance broker. They have to learn that on the job, and I think that should happen too.
I think at the very least, I think my one I don't know, way to approach it is like, if they're going to offer internships and they can't afford to pay like a full wage, only have an intern for 2-3 days a week, you know? And it's easier to do like a 10-hour day and get paid just as much per day, because then at least it's not ideal, but at least you have like money to pay for lunch for that one day. It's not spread over like 2-3 days or something, and there's only like one return ticket on the train sort of thing. But I still think that it's interesting, and I think it will be interesting to see how this develops as more people now are finding jobs and we're kind of like crawling out of this little situation that we're in, and people are getting hired more now than they have really in the past year, and people are finding new jobs, and for a lot of people are deciding that they want to enter new industries. Where will fashion sit in that?
I mean, I read fairly recently that there was a real, like, really sadly high number of people who were applying for sort of jobs below their means, as in someone who has a master's or a degree and is literally applying for a job that doesn't need that, whatever that may be, or like internships, and they've already worked in an industry, or, you know, things like that. And that's more a sign of the times. And I'm really hoping that we get out of that quickly, because I don't want that to like instill the culture of free work or people doing stuff like that, you know. But hopefully that's the sign of the times, and that's something we'll move away
better
from
over time. Exactly. Oh God, we could be like economists at this rate. First we're talking about,
I think we might be saving the world one podcast at a time.
Hold your horses. Well, that was interesting. That was really interesting. It'd be great to hear other people's
sure. I'd love to hear, especially, I think we have listeners who don't necessarily work in fashion. Like, would you work for free? Is that even an option for you guys? Does that sound crazy to you? Does that sound sensible? Would you?
And also, on just one last thought, I think they catch you at a time where you're young and foolish and you'll do anything.
For sure.
That's it. Don't be young